Sit down, honey. I'll handle the technical questions. You just smile and look pretty. He said it loud enough for the whole conference room to hear. 14 people around that table, and not one of them looked up from their phones. The woman he said it to didn't smile. She didn't look pretty on command. She set her portfolio on the table, pulled out the chair he had not offered her, and sat down the way you sit down when you have been waiting a long time for exactly this moment. Her name was Beverly Crane, 43 years old, gray starting at her temples, crow's feet she had stopped fighting, hands that had spent 20 years inside industrial machinery the way a surgeon's hands spend time inside people. She wore a blazer that had seen better conferences and shoes that had logged more miles than the rental car that brought her here. The man across from her was Donovan Ashby, Regional Vice President, Ashby Mercer Construction, the company his grandfather had built and his father had doubled, and he had spent 11 years finding new ways to photograph himself in front of. 51 years old, a watch that cost more than Beverly's truck, and a habit of finishing other people's sentences with the wrong word. He had not read her resume before this meeting. His assistant had scheduled it. His assistant's assistant had printed the resume and left it in a folder he had not opened. Beverly could tell by the way he looked at her, the slight pause when she walked in, the recalibration. She had seen that pause 10,000 times. It was the pause that asked, without asking, "Is this the right room?" She was there to bid on a contract. $4 million of structural repair work on the Hargrove Bridge, the oldest crossing in Caldwell County, which had been quietly failing for 6 years, while every engineering firm in 100 miles found reasons to walk away. The load-bearing calculations alone had broken 2 junior engineers at the county's own office. The repair required an approach nobody had tried on a structure of this age, this material, this particular kind of damage. Beverly had solved the engineering problem on a legal pad in a motel room in Columbus 2 weeks prior, the way she solved most things, alone, at night, with bad coffee and no audience. "We appreciate you coming in," said the man to Ashby's left, a younger version of the same haircut, whose name tag read Garrett Lyle, project coordinator. "We've had several firms submit bids." 6, Beverly said. Garrett looked up. "I'm sorry?" 6 firms submitted bids. 4 withdrew after reviewing the structural analysis. 1 submitted a bid so high it would have required a bond referendum. The 6th is still under review. She opened her portfolio. "That's why I'm here." Donovan Ashby smiled the way men smile when they're deciding whether to be charmed or annoyed. He hadn't decided yet. "And you think you can do what 6 other firms couldn't?" Beverly looked at him. Not at his watch, not at his haircut, not at the 11-year-old photograph behind him where he stood next to a ribbon cutting with a shovel, at him. "I don't think," she said. "I've already done it." The room got its first silence of the afternoon. 40 minutes later, the second and third silences would follow each other like trains. But to understand what happened in that conference room, you have to go back before the portfolio, before the legal pad, before the motel room in Columbus, into the world that built Beverly Crane. Martinsburg, West Virginia. A town that had been leaving itself for 40 years, 1 mill closure at a time, until the people who stayed were the ones who couldn't go or the ones who wouldn't. Beverly's father, Roy Crane, was the second kind. He ran a one-man welding shop on a gravel lot off Route 11 with a hand-painted sign that had been fading since Carter was president. He fixed what broke: farm equipment, trailer hitches, the undercarriages of trucks that other shops had given up on. He worked by feel as much as by measurement, the way old craftsmen do, diagnosing metal the way a doctor reads a face, by what it was hiding. Beverly was 7 when he first let her hold the torch, not to weld, just to hold it and understand the weight of it, the heat, the respect a tool like that requires before it will cooperate. "Metal remembers everything that ever happened to it," he told her once, turning a cracked axle over in his hands. "You want to fix it, you have to know its history first." She took that idea to school, to college on a partial scholarship at West Virginia University, to a master's in structural engineering that took her 4 years and 2 part-time jobs to complete. She applied to 12 firms when she graduated. 3 called back. 2 offered her positions that turned out to be data entry with an engineering title. The 3rd offered her a junior role at a mid-size infrastructure company in Pittsburgh, and she took it and stayed for 9 years, doing work that appeared in the footnotes of reports that bore other people's names. She left that job on a Tuesday, not fired. She left. Her supervisor had submitted her load analysis under his own name on a federal contract bid and been promoted for it. She found out the way you find out things like that, by reading the announcement email twice and understanding on the second read what the first read hadn't let her believe. She didn't make a scene. She went home, sat at her kitchen table, and thought about her father's shop. The sign fading on Route 11, the axle in his hands. Then she started her own company, Beverly Crane Structural Engineering LLC, registered in West Virginia, operating out of a repurposed garage in Morgantown with 2 employees. Beverly and a drafting software subscription that had been her birthday present to herself. No investors, no partners. No name that preceded her through the door and did the credibility work before she arrived. That was 8 years ago. In those 8 years, she had completed 27 contracts. Small ones at first, county bridge inspections, school gymnasium assessments, a water tower in a town so small the mayor also drove the school bus. Then slightly larger ones as word moved the way it moves in infrastructure circles, slowly and by referral. She had never lost a project to scope failure. She had never gone over budget by more than 2%. She had solved, in a strip mall office in Clarksburg, a vibration resonance problem that had stumped a team of 4 at a university engineering department. The university published the solution with a gracious acknowledgement in the footnotes. She was used to the footnotes. Hargrove Bridge was different. Hargrove Bridge was the kind of project that changes your category. Not the money, though $4 million was more than her company had ever handled. The bridge itself, built in 1931, modified in 1958, ignored for most of the years between then and now, and currently carrying 1,200 vehicles a day over a river that didn't care about anybody's timeline for repair. 3 previous engineering assessments had recommended closure. The county had not closed it because closing it added 45 minutes to every emergency vehicle route in the district, and nobody wanted to explain that to a school board or a cardiac patient's family. So the bridge stayed open, quietly failing every morning and every night. Beverly had first seen it 18 months ago, driving through Caldwell County on her way to a smaller job. She pulled over and looked at it the way her father used to look at broken axles, at what it was hiding. She came back the next week with her instruments. Then the week after. She spent 4 months studying that bridge in the hours between other contracts, early mornings, and weekends, standing on its deck and underneath its span and in a john boat on the river beneath it while her phone ran calculations she had designed herself. She built a structural model no existing software could replicate because no existing software had been built for this particular combination of original materials and subsequent modifications and the specific kind of decay that Western Pennsylvania river moisture produces over 9 decades. Then she went to the motel in Columbus and wrote the solution on a legal pad. When Caldwell County published the request for proposals, she had been waiting for it. The conference room at Ashby Mercer had the specific stillness of a place where important things occasionally happened, but usually didn't. Drop ceiling, wall-mounted flat screen showing a screensaver of company projects, a credenza with a coffee maker, and a bowl of wrapped mints. Beverly had been in 100 rooms like it. She knew how they worked. "Walk us through your methodology," Garrett Lyle said, pen ready. So she did. She started with the material failure, the specific kind of chloride-induced corrosion that had progressed unevenly through the original 1931 steel, because the 1958 modification had altered the load distribution in ways nobody had accounted for at the time. She explained why the previous assessments had misread the primary failure point, looking at the deck when the problem had been migrating for 20 years through the south anchor block. She described the repair sequence she had developed, 3 phases, non-simultaneous, allowing the bridge to remain open at reduced load capacity through all but 4 days of the entire project. She put the drawings on the table. They were hand-detailed, not computer-generated, hand-detailed, every measurement annotated in her own writing, the way her father annotated repairs on the equipment he worked on. Precise, dense. The drawings of someone who had stood in the places they were drawing. Garrett Lyle stopped writing halfway through her explanation. His pen was still. He was staring at a detail in the south anchor block repair that showed a sequence of temporary support placements so specific they implied thousands of hours of calculation and field observation. Donovan Ashby had not said anything for 11 minutes. Beverly noticed. She noticed the way you notice a loud sound that stops. At the end of her presentation, she set her proposal on the table, $3.8 million. Under the county's budget, 14 months, not the 18 she had heard other firms estimating. Ashby picked up the proposal, set it down, picked up one of the drawings. He studied the south anchor block detail for a moment. Then he looked at Beverly the way you look at something when your brain is revising a judgment. It made 30 seconds after she walked in the door. "This stay open methodology," he said. "You tested this?" "I modeled it. 4,000 load cycles under varying temperature conditions. The software to run those models doesn't exist commercially, so I built it." A pause. "You built the software, the model?" "Yes." Garrett Lyle's pen was still on the table. "Miss Crane," Ashby said. And the honorific came out slightly differently than it would have 20 minutes earlier, slightly more carefully. "The way you handle something you have just discovered is more valuable than you first assessed. Who else has seen these drawings? You're the first firm I've presented to." Another silence. This one longer. This one the kind that has a decision forming inside it. "Why?" Ashby asked. Beverly looked at him steadily. "Because the county gave the selection committee 30 days, and I don't need 30 days. I need one meeting with the right firm." Ashby sat back in his chair. Behind him, the screensaver cycled through photographs of bridges and highways and smiling men in hard hats, none of whom were Beverly Crane. "Walk me through the south anchor sequence again," he said. "From the beginning." She did. What nobody in that room knew yet, except Beverly, and what the room would spend the next 6 weeks learning, was that the south anchor repair sequence was the least of it. That was the part she had explained. The part she hadn't explained, the part buried in the appendix of her proposal, that Garrett Lyle would not open until 9 o'clock that evening, sitting at his kitchen table with his reading glasses on and his wife asking him twice if he was coming to bed, was the load redistribution model. Because here is the thing about Hargrove Bridge that no prior assessment had ever grasped. The bridge was not failing where it appeared to be failing. The visible damage, the deck cracking, the guardrail settlements, the surface corrosion everyone could see and photograph and report, was the consequence, not the cause. The cause was a harmonic loading pattern that had been accumulating in the structure's subspan since 1958. Invisible to standard instrumentation, detectable only if you knew to look for it and knew how to build a sensor configuration that could find it. Beverly knew because of a crack she had noticed during her 3rd visit. A hairline crack in a secondary member that had no business being cracked. It was in the wrong place for the loads the bridge was carrying. Wrong by a significant margin. Cracks like that were not random. They were messages. She had spent 6 weeks figuring out what that crack was saying. What it said was, the bridge is acting like 2 different structures that have been forced to behave like one. And the forcing has been going on long enough that the seam between them has almost given way. Nobody had missed this because they were incompetent. They had missed it because finding it required an approach that didn't exist in the standard toolkit. The standard toolkit doesn't get built for bridges like this, one-of-a-kind structures from an era when construction documentation was incomplete and modification records were lost, and the engineers who built them had been dead for 50 years. You had to go looking for it with tools you made yourself. Beverly's father had taught her that too, walking through the shop when she was 12, running her hand along the flank of a tractor engine that had stumped 3 mechanics. Most people look for the problem that fits the tools they have, he said. The real problem waits for somebody willing to make a new tool. The appendix in Beverly's proposal was the new tool. Garrett Lyle called her at 7:45 the next morning. He did not say hello before he started talking. The harmonic model, he said. Is this published anywhere? No. Has anyone else seen it? Just you, as of this morning. A pause on the line. She could hear him breathing. Miss Crane, where are you right now? My office, which was also her garage. She didn't add that part. Can you come back in? Today? Donovan wants the full technical team in the room. She came back in. The full technical team was 7 people. 2 of them had engineering degrees that hung on the wall of their offices in frames Beverly had noticed the day before. One of them, a structural specialist named Aldrich, who had 30 years in bridge repair and a reputation she had heard of, spent the first 20 minutes of the meeting attempting to find an error in her harmonic model. He could not find one. She watched him look. She did not rush him. She sat at the table the way her father used to sit across from a difficult repair, patient and unhurried, because the work was right, and she knew it, and the knowing was enough. Aldrich set down the appendix. He looked at Beverly. He looked at it the way Garrett Lyle's pen had stopped, the way Ashby's voice had changed its register on the second use of her honorific. Where did you develop this? He said. Not quite a question. My shop, Beverly said. Aldrich was quiet for a moment. I did my doctoral dissertation on harmonic loading in post-modification span structures, he said. 41 years ago. I found 7 studies that touched on it. I know every name in that literature. He paused. Yours isn't in it. No, Beverly said. I didn't publish. Why not? She thought about the 9 years and the footnotes and the Pittsburgh supervisor whose promotion email she had read twice. I was busy doing the work, she said. Aldrich nodded once, slowly. Then he picked up a pen and signed his name at the bottom of his technical review page. Donovan Ashby was watching from the end of the table. He had not said anything for most of the session, which was the opposite of the day before. He had a notepad in front of him with nothing written on it. When Aldrich signed the page, Ashby looked at Beverly. I owe you an apology, he said. She had not expected that. Men like Ashby did not usually produce that sentence. She kept her face quiet. Yesterday, he said, what I said when you sat down. She waited. That was wrong, he said. It was stupid and it was wrong. I looked at you and I made a judgment I had no basis for. And I want to say that clearly in front of this room, because you deserve to hear it clearly. The room was very still. I'm not asking you to forgive it, he said. I'm just saying it happened and I'm saying it was wrong. Beverly looked at him for a moment. At the notepad with nothing on it. At the watch he had stopped glancing at. Okay, she said. She didn't offer absolution and she didn't withhold it. She just acknowledged the thing the way you acknowledge something that is true. Because it was, and because she had things to do. About the contract, she said. Ashby almost smiled. Didn't quite. About the contract. Ashby Mercer signed on a Thursday. The county's selection committee ratified it the following Tuesday, the fastest committee vote in Caldwell County infrastructure history, which is not a competitive category, but which the county commissioner mentioned anyway, slightly baffled by his own efficiency. Beverly Crane Structural Engineering was awarded the Hargrove Bridge Rehabilitation Contract at $3.8 million, 14-month timeline, with a performance bond that the county's insurance carrier had taken approximately 48 hours to approve after reviewing her technical documentation. The Aldrich review went with the file. Nobody sat on that file. Work began in March. Beverly ran the project the way she ran everything. From the site, not from an office. She was on that bridge in the mornings before her crew arrived and sometimes after they left. She wore the same hard hat she had worn for 12 years, a red one with her initials written on the back in her father's handwriting, from the day he had given it to her when she got her license. She had kept it because he died 8 months later. Heart attack, early morning, in the shop he had run for 32 years, the gravel lot on Route 11, the fading sign. She found out from her brother, who called her while she was on a job site in Wheeling. She finished the inspection she was conducting because the scaffold was up and the window was narrow, and her father would have finished the inspection. She drove to Martinsburg that night. At the shop, after the arrangements had been made, she sat alone in the dark and ran her hand along the flanks of the equipment he had not finished fixing, feeling for what it was hiding. The way he had taught her, she took nothing from the shop except the logbooks. 40 years of repairs, every one of them annotated in his careful print. The date, the equipment, the problem, the solution, and one line at the end of each entry that read, method. Because the method was the thing worth keeping. Anybody could fix a specific problem. The method could fix the next one, and the one after that. The logbooks were in a drawer in her office, the garage one. She referenced them sometimes, not for the specific repairs, for the method, the approach, the reminder that metal remembers everything that ever happened to it, and the job is always to learn the history before you try to fix the thing. Hargrove Bridge was on schedule at 6 months, on schedule at 10 months. The stay-open methodology worked precisely as her model had projected. 4 days of full closure, 2 in March and 2 in October, both days dry, both days efficient. The local paper ran a story about traffic being smoother than expected. The county commissioner gave a statement that managed to imply, without quite saying, that the outcome had been his plan all along. Nobody mentioned Beverly in the commissioner's statement. Aldrich mentioned her. In a paper he submitted to the Journal of Structural Engineering that November, a paper about harmonic loading in post-modification bridge structures, the first paper on that specific subject in 23 years. She was listed as a co-author. He had called her to ask permission. She had said yes before he finished asking. The paper was not the internet. It moved slowly, through conference rooms that were quieter than Ashby Mercer's and more interested in annotated drawings. But it moved. Her name moved with it. Not in a footnote, at the top where the work lives. Donovan Ashby sent her a handwritten note when the project closed. 3 sentences. He thanked her for the work. He said the bridge would stand for 60 years. He said he hoped she would come back and bid on the next one. She wrote back one line, "I'll be there." There was one more thing. The week the project closed, she drove to Martinsburg. She took the same route, Route 11, past the gravel lot. The shop was gone. Her brother had sold the property 2 years prior, a storage facility now, chain-link fence where the hand-painted sign used to be. She had known that. She didn't stop. She kept driving to the cemetery and sat for a while on the bench near her father's grave. The one she'd had placed there because there was no bench and you needed somewhere to sit when you came to talk to someone. She didn't say much. She told him about the harmonic model, about the crack in the wrong place, about the method. She told him the bridge would hold, then she drove home. A year after the project closed, a photograph ran in a trade publication. Beverly Crane on the finished Hargrove Bridge. Red hard hat. Her initials in someone else's handwriting on the back. The caption got her age wrong. Said she was 41, she was 44. She didn't write a correction. The photograph was the first one in 12 years of work that placed her in the center of the frame. Not the footnotes, not the acknowledgments, not the background of someone else's ribbon cutting. The center. She looked exactly like herself. I'm telling you this story because somewhere right now, there is a person in the wrong chair in someone else's meeting, being told to smile and look pretty and leave the technical questions to somebody else. Maybe that person is you. Maybe that person is someone you raised or someone who raised you. And I want you to know what Beverly Crane knew when she sat down at that table. The work is the answer. The work is always the answer. Not the credentials framed on the wall, not the watch on the wrist, not the company in the grandfather's name. The work, the method, the willingness to stand under a failing bridge in a John boat on a cold river and build a tool that doesn't exist yet because the problem in front of you requires it. The room will catch up. It always does. Sometimes it apologizes first. Here is what I want to ask you, and I read every single comment. Who is the person in your life doing work that no one has properly named yet? A parent, a neighbor, a kid in your house who's been quietly building something the world hasn't figured out how to measure. Tell me about them. Drop it below. And if this story stayed with you, share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Because this is what we do here at The Final Verdict. Every week, we find the people the room miscounted, right up until the moment the room had to stand up and sign its name.